The fake money stampede. It is New Year's Eve 2014 in Shanghai, China. The historic Bund waterfront is packed with nearly 300,000 people standing shoulder to shoulder waiting for the countdown. The atmosphere is electric. It is cold, loud, and everyone is looking up expecting fireworks. But at 11:35 p.m., just before midnight, attention shifts to a window on the third floor of a luxury building. Green paper starts raining down into the crowd. In the dark, under the streetlights, it looks exactly like American $100 bills. Instantly, the mood shifts from celebration to chaos. A massive wave surges forward to catch the cash. But the people at the front are already pressed against a concrete staircase. You have two forces colliding, people trying to come down the stairs to leave and a wall of people trying to go up to grab the money. The staircase becomes a crush zone. The pressure builds so fast that people are lifted off their feet. They aren't trampled, they are squeezed until they simply cannot breathe. In the chaos, someone finally grabs one of the bills. It isn't a $100 bill, it is a promotional coupon for a nightclub, where it should say "In God We Trust," it says M18. It was never money. By the time police clear the pile, 36 people lie dead on the steps. They didn't die from a fire or a collapse. They lost their lives in a panic over a coupon that had absolutely no value. The Hillsborough Stadium disaster. On April 15, 1989, in United Kingdom. Tens of thousands of football supporters gathered at Hillsborough Stadium for an FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. It was a calm spring afternoon, and outside the ground, delays at the turnstiles were already building tension. Liverpool fans were directed toward the Leppings Lane end, an area with limited access and poor crowd design. As kickoff approached, large numbers of supporters were still trapped outside, compressed into a narrowing space. At 2:52 p.m., police opened an exit gate to relieve the pressure outside. A large wave of supporters poured through at once. With no guidance from officers, many moved straight down the central tunnel into pens that were already dangerously full. Inside, space vanished almost immediately. Fans at the front were pressed hard against steel fencing, while those behind continued to arrive, unaware there was nowhere left to go. Bodies locked together, arms were pinned, breathing became mechanically difficult. As pressure accumulated, people began collapsing where they stood, unable to free themselves or those around them. Despite clear signs of distress, the match continued briefly. By the time it was halted, the situation had already turned fatal. 97 people died. Most died from suffocation because the pressure was so great they couldn't breathe. The Bridge of Panic. On the night of 22 November 2010, in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, the water festival returned after 3 years of cancellation. The anticipation created a massive surge, drawing millions of people into the capital to celebrate the end of the rainy season. The center of the celebration was Diamond Island, a modern venue connected to the mainland by a narrow suspension bridge. By late evening, as the boat races ended and the fireworks concluded on the island, the bridge became a trap. Thousands of people trying to leave the island collided head-on with thousands more trying to enter. The opposing flows of humanity crashed into each other, creating a deadlock where movement became impossible. Because it was a suspension bridge, the structure began to sway under the extreme load. It was designed to do this. But to the rural visitors unfamiliar with modern engineering, the swaying felt like a collapse. Panic erupted when rumors spread that the bridge was breaking, while others screamed that the metal railings were electrified. Pressure built so rapidly that people were lifted off their feet, pinned so tightly their ribs could not expand to take a breath. Most victims suffocated while standing upright, trapped in the gridlock with almost nowhere to fall and nowhere to escape. When the pressure finally released, 347 people had died in place. The upcoming cases are the most catastrophic on this list. If you're still with us, like the video and subscribe before we continue. The Death Trap Theater. On the freezing afternoon of December 30, 1903, in Chicago, USA, the newly built Iroquois Theater, advertised as absolutely fireproof, was packed for a popular matinee performance of Mr. Bluebeard, a light musical comedy. The luxury hall was filled with over 2,000 people, mostly mothers and children, crammed into a space designed for only 1,600. During the second act, a spark from a stage light ignited a curtain. At first, the audience remained calm, trusting the building's safety. But when stagehands tried to lower the asbestos fire curtain to seal the stage, it snagged on a wire and jammed halfway. Then came the fatal mistake. Performers opened the backstage doors to escape, allowing a rush of cold winter air to blow a massive fireball under the jammed curtain and directly into the crowded balconies. Panic was instant. Thousands surged toward the exits in the dark, only to find a maze of dead ends. The main doors opened inward, making them impossible to pull open against the crushing weight of the crowd. Other exits were hidden behind heavy velvet drapes or padlocked to prevent gate crashers. On the stairways, iron gates meant to separate the cheap seats from the wealthy were locked tight. The crowd from the upper gallery was trapped against the metal bars while the fire roared behind them. Hundreds suffocated against the very doors meant to save them before the flames even reached them. By the time firefighters broke through, 602 people lay dead. It remains the deadliest single-building fire in U.S. history. Mina intersection crush. On the scorching morning of 24 September 2015, in the Valley of Mina, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims were participating in the Hajj. The focal point of the day was the stoning of the devil ritual, requiring massive crowds to move from sprawling tent cities to the multi-level Jamarat Bridge. To prevent disasters, authorities relied on a strict one-way traffic system. Large groups of pilgrims were scheduled to move in organized waves. But at the intersection of Street 204 and Street 223, the system catastrophically broke down. Here is how the death trap is believed to have formed. A massive river of pilgrims was marching straight down Street 204 toward the bridge. Suddenly, the front of the crowd stopped. Some survivors later reported that access ahead appeared to be blocked or restricted, halting forward movement. But the hundreds of thousands of people marching from behind did not know the path was no longer moving. They kept walking, blindly pushing forward into the stalled crowd. At the same time, a second, equally dense wave of pilgrims was routed down Street 223, which intersected perpendicularly with Street 204. The two crowds converged at a 90-degree angle in a narrow corridor lined with high metal fences. There was nowhere to turn, nowhere to step aside, and no clear way out. Crowd density quickly rose to extreme levels, likely exceeding safe limits. At this point, the crowd stopped behaving as individuals and began moving as a single mass. Shockwaves traveled through bodies under pressure. The force was so intense that people's ribs were held in place, making it impossible to draw breath. The environment intensified the gridlock. Temperatures reached around 115 degrees Fahrenheit or 46 degrees Celsius. Exhausted and dehydrated, pilgrims began to collapse while standing. When someone fell, the weight of the crowd forced others down on top of them, creating a progressive pileup of bodies. By the time emergency vehicles were able to reach the area, the scale of the disaster became clear. While official Saudi figures reported 769 deaths, independent counts based on foreign government and hospital records placed the number far higher, with estimates reaching over 2,300. It remains one of the deadliest crowd disasters in modern history. The Kedarnath disaster. On the evening of June 16, 2013, in the mountains of Kedarnath, India, the ancient Kedarnath temple, located more than 11,000 feet above sea level, was overflowing with life. It was the peak of the pilgrimage season, drawing thousands of worshippers deep into the isolated valley, but a silent threat was building. Exceptionally heavy monsoon rains battered the region. Just upstream, Chorabari Lake was swelling rapidly under relentless rainfall, its waters mixing with glacial melt and debris carried down from the surrounding slopes. Late on June 16 and into the morning of June 17, that unstable system gave way. A massive surge of freezing water, boulders, and glacial mud was unleashed, sending a roaring wall of debris down the mountainside. Because the valley was so narrow, it acted as a perfect funnel, directing the full force of the flood straight into the crowded town. There was no warning and absolutely nowhere to run. The sheer geography of the isolated site had turned it into an inescapable trap. Within moments, guesthouses, shops, and the only mountain road out were erased by the churning flow. Many people trying to escape were swept away in the freezing currents. While the town was almost completely obliterated, the historic Kedarnath temple miraculously survived. A massive boulder became wedged directly behind the temple, acting as a natural shield that deflected much of the debris. Many would later call it a miracle, but for the worshippers trapped outside the sanctuary, there was no protection. By the time military helicopters finally reached the cut-off valley, more than 5,700 people were dead or missing. See you in the next one. Until then, keep watching our other videos.